Do you really think getting pregnant is enough to buy your way into the Lyndon family? Plenty of women would kill to carry my child. The sneer was still half formed on my lips when my alcohol-addled brain suddenly snapped awake, looking at the positive pregnancy test in my hand, then at the tear-stained, heartbroken face of the strange woman sitting across from me. I fell into a stunned silence. Where the hell am I? A crisp, electronic voice chimed inside my head. Welcome to the Scumbag Reformation Program. You have been selected as the ultimate good guy. Your mission: rescue your girlfriend Jacqueline, prevent her suicide, and give her a warm, loving home. A flood of memories that did not belong to me rushed into my brain. I desperately needed to sort through this mental library and figure out what the hell was going on. Staring at the utterly defeated woman in front of me, my chest tightened. Wait for me here. I need to use the restroom. I turned and walked away. I did not even catch the light dying in her eyes behind me. Of course, she thought she was being abandoned again. She thought her boyfriend did not care about her or their baby. I rushed to the restroom. The face reflecting in the mirror was identical to my old one, with sharp brows and deep-set eyes, strikingly handsome, except there was a lingering trace of cruelty in this body's expression. I had transmigrated into a system-maintained world. The female protagonist's death had caused a temporal glitch, and I was chosen to patch the timeline. I took a deep breath. They picked the right guy. I could not stand hurting women. As I dug deeper into the host's memories, I could not help but curse out loud. This guy was an absolute scumbag. The host was also named Tristan. He was a notorious trust fund playboy in high society circles, the only heir to the Lyndon empire. His father had never played around or had illegitimate kids, so Tristan's inheritance was set in stone. To make matters worse, his mother had passed away years ago. His father, who had loved his late wife dearly, spoiled his only son rotten. Under such relentless indulgence, Tristan had grown into a textbook rich brat. He could get anything he wanted. But Jacqueline, the campus sweetheart of Hudson University, was a rare, untouchable beauty. After his initial pursuits failed, his competitive streak kicked in. It took a year of relentless pursuit to finally win her over. The first year was pure bliss. But after Jacqueline graduated, Tristan pressured her into giving up her dreams of graduate school. He wanted her kept like a pet, a caged songbird in his penthouse. From then on, Jacqueline's world shrunk until it only spun around him. Her gentle, introverted nature morphed into a fragile, timid insecurity. But instead of cherishing her, the scumbag grew bored of her compliance and started looking for cheap thrills elsewhere. Jacqueline was an orphan. The massive wealth gap between them had already made her deeply insecure. Sensitive and quiet, she would only hide away and weep silently, never raising her voice at him. Meanwhile, Tristan stayed out all night, subjected her to emotional abuse and gaslighting, and let the tabloids run wild with his flings. Piece by piece, she fell into deep depression. Yet, she clung to the promise he once made, that he would give her a real home. Every time she fell into despair, she would remember that promise and hope again. Until today, when she showed him the positive pregnancy test. He had spat out the most venomous words imaginable. Do you really think getting pregnant is enough to buy your way into the Lyndon family? Who even knows if it is mine? But hey, if you want to keep it, the Lyndon family can afford a bastard child. Those cruel words broke her completely. After getting a quiet abortion, she returned to her dingy rented room, saw a headline about the Lyndon heir entering a hotel with some actress, and hanged herself. It was only after her death that the scumbag felt a shred of regret. Realizing she was the only one he ever loved, he drowned his sorrows in alcohol, found a waitress who looked like her as a substitute, and dragged himself through another toxic relationship before dying lonely amidst his cold mountain of cash. What an absolute psycho. Fortunately, I had arrived just in time to cut off the rest of those horrible words. But before I could even catch my breath, the system sounded an alarm. Warning, host. Jacqueline is heading to the hospital right now for an abortion. Why is she being so reckless? What if she hurts herself? I bolted out of the restroom. Guided by the system's GPS tracker, I found Jacqueline just as she was standing at the clinic's billing counter. Jacqueline. The familiar voice made her stiffen. She turned around slowly, her eyes wide with disbelief. She seemed to catch a glimpse of genuine panic and sorrow in my eyes. She must be imagining things. Why would I ever worry about her? I snatched the consent form from her trembling hands. Seeing the scheduled surgical abortion, my eyes stung with sudden heat. Do you really care so little about our baby? Do you even care about me at all? Are you really this desperate to get rid of our child just so you can run off with your precious college mentor? My sudden attack of reverse psychology left Jacqueline completely dazed. What? What are you talking about? I give up, I said, my voice cracking as I pulled her fragile frame into my arms, burying my face in the crook of her neck. A wave of raw emotion hit my throat. I admit it. Every girl I brought around, every rumor, it was all an act. I just wanted to see if you actually cared. But you never said a word. You never asked. I wanted you to scream at me, to throw a tantrum, just so I'd know you still loved me. I held her tighter, letting my voice tremble. I surrender. Even if you do not love me, just stay with me. Let's get married. Please. The system could not help but chime in. Damn host. You are a natural at gaslighting. I did not have a choice. The host had crossed too many lines. Jacqueline was the type to bottle up her pain, drowning in her own insecurities. Only a fierce, overwhelming confession could shatter her walls and give her a sense of security. A single tear slipped down her hair, dampening her collarbone. The warmth of it seemed to seep straight into her chest, filling her with a heavy, aching confusion. If what I said was true, then what were all those cold nights she endured? And what was this about her mentor? Before she could process any of it, I took her by the hand, led her out of the hospital, and buckled her into the passenger seat of my car. Jacqueline finally blinked back her confusion. Where are we going? To the courthouse. We are getting married. The dam finally broke. Tears poured down her face, washing away weeks of silent agony. Tristan, if you are only doing this because of the baby, I can still go back. You do not have to trap yourself. The sudden hope was too beautiful. She was terrified that if she reached out to grab it, she would only fall from a higher cliff. Go back. So you can run straight to that mentor of yours. I let out a bitter, jealous laugh, keeping up the act. Do you really love him that much? This was the second time she had heard me mention her college mentor, Nolan. It was absurd, but a powerful intuition bloomed in her chest. There was a massive misunderstanding between us. A misunderstanding that had poisoned their entire relationship. She opened her mouth, but the words tangled in her throat. She did not even know where to begin. The marriage registry office was bathed in the dull fluorescent glare of a Tuesday afternoon. The clerk behind the counter looked exhausted, stamping marriage certificates, with the mechanical rhythm of someone who had seen 1,000 promises made and broken. But when I slammed my black Centurion card onto the marble countertop, alongside our identification cards, her eyes widened. Priority processing, I said, my voice cutting through the quiet office like a blade. My hand was wrapped tightly around Jacqueline's fingers. They were ice cold, trembling like a bird caught in a winter gale. Jacqueline stood beside me in her oversized, faded linen trench coat. Her small face was half hidden beneath a pale mask, her eyes wide, glassy, and completely dazed. She looked as though she were walking through a dream, or a terrifyingly vivid hallucination. Tristan, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the air conditioner. Her fingers twitched inside my grip, trying to pull away. You don't have to do this. If your father finds out. My father will be popping champagne, I interrupted, turning to face her fully. I reached out with my free hand and gently tucked a stray strand of dark hair behind her ear. My fingertips brushed against her cheek. Her skin was dry and paper-thin. It broke my heart. How could the previous Tristan have looked at this fragile, delicate woman and seen something to humiliate? Jacqueline, listen to me, I said, dropping my voice into a low, fiercely intense register. I am done hiding. I am done playing these stupid, arrogant games. You are carrying my child, and you are going to be my wife. Today. In 20 minutes. The clerk stammered, "Yes, sir, the photo. You need an official marriage photo." "Take it now," I ordered. 2 minutes later, we were standing in front of a bright red backdrop. The photographer adjusted his camera lens. "Sir, please smile a bit more. Ma'am, try to look at the camera." Jacqueline was staring straight ahead, her lower lip quivering slightly. I didn't smile. Instead, I leaned in close, wrapping my arm around her narrow waist and pulling her firmly against my side. I tilted my head down, pressing my temple against hers. Flash. The camera clicked. The flash blinded us for a second. When the clerk handed us the 2 crimson booklets stamped with gold leaf, Jacqueline held hers with both hands, staring at her name printed beside mine as if it were written in a foreign language. Tristan Lyndon and Jacqueline Chun. Legally married. System notification. Jacqueline's suicide probability has dropped from 99% to 75%. Good job, host. But beware, her deep-seated insecurity remains dangerously high. One wrong move and the timeline will relapse. 75% is still way too high, I thought grimly, my jaw tightening. I need to completely reconstruct her reality. As we walked out of the registry office, the afternoon sun hit Jacqueline's face. She flinched, instinctively stepping back into my shadow. She had spent the last 2 years hidden away in my penthouse, isolated from her university friends, deprived of her ambitions, taught to believe she was nothing more than an inconvenient secret. "Where are we going now?" she asked quietly. "Back to the penthouse." "No," I said, opening the door of the matte black Aston Martin for her. "We are never going back to that penthouse." She froze, one foot on the running board. Panic flared in her eyes. "Why? Are you putting me somewhere else?" To her, somewhere else, meant a secluded house in the suburbs where I could bury her and the baby away from the eyes of high society. I let out a soft, exasperated sigh, cupping her face with both hands. Jacqueline, look at me. She forced her gaze to meet mine. That penthouse is filled with bad memories, cold nights, and my own pathetic, immature mistakes, I said, staring straight into her tear-filled eyes. You deserve a real home. A place with a garden. A place that belongs to you. She swallowed hard, her chest heaving under her coat. Tristan, why are you saying these things? Yesterday you said. Yesterday I was a coward who thought that if I let you into my heart completely, you'd realize how empty I was and leave me for someone smart, like Nolan. I lied effortlessly, weaving the reverse gaslighting logic tighter around her mind. I lashed out because I was terrified. But when I saw you standing in that hospital today, I realized that losing you would kill me. So, stop asking. You're stuck with me now. She bit her lip so hard a drop of blood nearly welled up. The confusion in her mind was palpable. She wanted to believe it so badly. Her desperate, starved heart was clinging to every word I offered like a lifeline. But 2 years of systematic emotional abuse couldn't be erased by one afternoon. Come on, I said gently, easing her into the leather seat and buckling her seatbelt myself. My dad is waiting. Jacqueline's body went rigid. You're your dad? Of course, I smirked, rounding the car to get into the driver's seat. He needs to know he's going to be a grandfather. The Lyndon family estate was a sprawling, classical French-style manor situated on a private hill overlooking the northern coastline. As the Aston Martin roared up the winding driveway, passing manicured lawns and fountains, Jacqueline's hands clutched her red marriage booklet so tightly her knuckles turned white. Tristan, she whispered, her voice trembling. Your father. He hates people. Like me. He thinks everyone outside our circle is a gold digger. If I go in there, if he breathes a word that makes you uncomfortable, we leave, and I take 50% of his company shares with me, I said smoothly, pulling up to the main entrance. Before Jacqueline could digest that insane statement, the massive mahogany front door swung open. A tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 50s stepped out onto the marble stairs. Marcus Lyndon, the chairman of the Lyndon conglomerate, possessed a formidable face that usually terrified corporate boardrooms across the country. But right now, his eyes were fixed on the black car, his expression a chaotic mixture of disbelief, anxiety, and deep-seated exhaustion. I stepped out of the car, walked around to the passenger side, and held out my hand for Jacqueline. She hesitated for 3 full seconds before placing her trembling palm in mine. I pulled her out gently, keeping my arm firmly wrapped around her waist, supporting most of her weight. Marcus Lyndon marched down the steps, his sharp eyes sweeping over us. He looked at my fierce, protective posture, then down at Jacqueline's pale, terrified face, and finally at our joined hands. Tristan, the old man growled, his voice deep and rumbling. What is the meaning of this? Your secretary called me 20 minutes ago and said you pulled $40 million out of your personal trust fund to buy a residential property in the West Hills. And why are you holding Miss Chun like she's about to break? I didn't answer him with words. Instead, I pulled the 2 red marriage booklets out of my inner jacket pocket and slapped them directly against his expensive tailored suit chest. Meet your daughter-in-law, I said calmly. And in 7 months you can meet your grandchild. Now move aside, the wind is too cold for her. Silence fell over the courtyard. The butler at the top of the stairs dropped his silver tray. It clattered loudly against the stone. Marcus Lyndon stood frozen. He slowly lifted the red booklets, opened one, and stared at the official red seal in our photograph. His eyes darted from the paper to Jacqueline, whose head was bowed so low she looked like she wanted the earth to swallow her whole. For 5 agonizing seconds, nobody moved. Then, Marcus Lyndon let out a roar that shook the glass lanterns of the portico. You absolute fool. Jacqueline flinched, shrinking against my side. I immediately stepped in front of her, glaring at my new father. Don't yell at her. I snapped. If you scare my wife, I swear to God I'll move to Europe tomorrow. I'm not yelling at her, you arrogant brat. Marcus barked, his face turning bright red as he shoved the booklet into his pocket and stepped past me. Immediately dropped his terrifying demeanor, stepping up to Jacqueline with an awkward, flustered expression. Miss Chun. I mean Jacqueline. The old billionaire stammered, his voice dropping 3 octaves into an absurdly soft, gentle tone. Is this true? Did this bastard force you into this? If he threatened you, you tell me right now. I have 3 legal teams inside, and I will strip him of every dime before dinner. Jacqueline blinked, completely stunned. And no, Mr. Lyndon. I call him Dad. I chimed in, leaning against the car. He's been desperate for a daughter ever since Mom passed away. He used to complain every Christmas that I was too ugly to buy dresses for. Marcus shot me a glare that could kill a horse, but when he turned back to Jacqueline, his eyes were genuinely soft and deeply relieved. Jacqueline, Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying the faint tremor of an aging man who had watched his only son ruin his life for years. This boy of mine, he's been a reckless, arrogant terror ever since his mother died. I thought he was going to end up in a ditch or a prison cell. If he has finally decided to settle down and treat a good girl like you properly, then the Lyndon family owes you a debt we can never repay. He turned to the butler. Thomas, what are you standing there for? Call the private medical team. Prepare the master suite on the ground floor, no stairs for my daughter-in-law, and cancel my board meeting at 4. Jacqueline stood in the middle of the grand driveway, watching the feared titan of the business world frantically order his staff around just to get her a warm glass of milk. Her lower lip trembled again. A single, silent tear spilled over her eyelashes. This wasn't the cold, elitist nightmare she had prepared herself for. This was warmth. A terrifying, overwhelming wave of warmth. I leaned down to her ear, whispering softly, "See? I told you. You're the boss. Here now." System notification. Jacqueline's suicide probability has dropped to 50%. A sense of belonging is beginning to form. Keep pushing, host. While Jacqueline was being pampered by the manor's head chef and 3 private obstetricians in the sunroom, I sat in Marcus's private study sipping cold scotch. Marcus slammed a heavy leather folder onto the desk in front of me. "These are the tabloids from the last 6 months, the old man said, his eyes cold and sharp. "And these are the receipts from the high-end clubs in the entertainment district. Tristan, if you think you can bring a sweet, fragile girl like Jacqueline into this family, and then continue your disgusting lifestyle outside, I will personally break your legs." I looked at the photos in the folder. The previous Tristan standing outside luxury hotels with starlets. The previous Tristan laughing in VIP lounges surrounded by gold diggers and fake friends. Every single image was a dagger that had been driven straight into Jacqueline's insecure heart. "I'm cleaning house today," I said, setting my glass down. "What?" Marcus frowned. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I found in my contact list under the name Julian Pinnacle Club. Julian was the ringleader of Tristan's old circle, a group of wealthy parasitic playboys who used Tristan's endless capital to fuel their degenerate lifestyles. The call picked up on the 3rd ring. Loud music and women's laughter spilled through the speaker. "Yo, Tristan." Julian's loud, obnoxious voice rang out. "Where the hell are you, man? The party at the marina started an hour ago. Chloe brought 3 new girls from the modeling agency. They're dying to meet the Lyndon heir." I kept my voice deadpan. "Julian, are the guys all there?" "Yeah. Mark, Leo, and the whole crew. What's up? Are you bringing the Aston Martin?" "Put me on speaker," I said. "Haha, all right. Guys, quiet down. The king is speaking." The background noise dimmed slightly as Julian switched the call to the lounge's main speaker system. I took a deep breath, ensuring my voice carried the absolute, freezing cold authority of a man who held their entire social existence in his hands. "Listen closely." I said, every word crisp and deliberate. "As of 3 o'clock this afternoon, I am a married man. My wife is Jacqueline Chin." A collective pause hit the speaker, followed by a burst of hysterical laughter. From Julian. "What? Jacqueline? That boring, quiet girl from Hudson Uni?" "Tristan, stop cap." "If any of you," I interrupted, my voice dropping so low it sounded like gravel scraping against steel, "speak her name with that tone again, I will personally ensure your family's credit lines with the Lyndon Bank are revoked by midnight." The laughter died instantly. Dead, suffocating silence filled the line. "Tristan, are you serious?" Julian stammered, his cocky attitude evaporating. She is the mistress of the Lyndon family," I cut in ruthlessly. "And as for the rest of you parasites, our friendship is over. Delete my number. If I see any of you within 500 yards of my wife, or if I hear a single rumor about my past being leaked to the press, I won't just cut you off. I will destroy your father's businesses." "Tristan, you can't be serious. Over a woman?" Mark's frantic voice yelled through the speaker. "She isn't a woman," I said, staring at my reflection in the dark glass of the steady window. "She is my life. Lose my number. Hang up." I threw the phone onto the desk. Marcus sat behind his mahogany desk, staring at me with his mouth slightly open. The formidable chairman looked as though he had just seen a ghost. "You," Marcus stammered, rubbing his eyes. "You actually cut them off? Just like that?" "They were trash," I said, standing up and straightening my collar. "And I have a family to take care of now." I walked out of the study, leaving my father sitting in stunned silence. As I approached the sunroom, I saw Jacqueline sitting by the floor-to-ceiling glass windows overlooking the rose garden. She was holding a warm cup of herbal tea, wearing a soft cream cashmere sweater that Marcus had immediately ordered from a luxury boutique. She had her phone in her hand. Her screen was glowing. She had seen the news. Because 10 minutes ago, I had instructed the Lyndon Group's public relations department to issue an official nationwide press release. Official announcement. Tristan Lyndon, sole heir to the Lyndon conglomerate, has officially registered his marriage with Miss Jacqueline Chin. The Lyndon family requests privacy as they prepare for the birth of their first child. Jacqueline looked up as I entered the room. Her eyes were wide, filled with a terrifyingly beautiful, fragile hope that made my throat tighten. Tristan, she whispered, her voice trembling. The news? Everyone is talking about it. My old classmates, your friends, they're all texting me. I walked over, knelt down on the soft Persian rug in front of her chair, and took both of her hands in mine. Let them talk, I said gently, looking up at her. From today on, nobody in this city will ever call you an illegitimate secret again. You are Mrs. Lyndon, and nobody will ever make you feel small again. Jacqueline stared down at me. She looked at the man who had once treated her like a caged bird, now kneeling before her on a carpet worth more than her old apartment building, holding her hands as if they were made of priceless glass. A tear fell from her eye, landing directly on the back of my hand. System notification. Jacqueline's suicide probability has dropped to 35%. The host has successfully altered her social standing. Current mission. Progress 40%. 3 days passed in a blur of luxury, medical evaluations, and relentless pampering. I had purchased a private, historic estate in the West Hills, a 3-story Tudor mansion surrounded by oak trees, a greenhouse, and a private security perimeter. I hired a team of top-tier, female-only staff and a full-time medical crew to monitor Jacqueline's health round the clock. Jacqueline was slowly getting used to the change, but her core trauma remained. She still walked quietly, spoke softly, and constantly checked my expression as if expecting the real, cruel Tristan to suddenly reappear and shatter her dream. On Friday morning, I found her sitting in the estate's library, staring out at the greenhouse with a look of profound, quiet sorrow. What are you thinking about? I asked, stepping up behind her and wrapping my arms gently around her shoulders. She was gaining a little bit of color in her cheeks, but she was still dangerously thin. Jacqueline leaned her head back against my chest, letting out a soft sigh. I was just looking at the plants. Before I met you, before I dropped out, I was working on my thesis in botanical conservation at Hudson Uni. Professor Nolan said my research on rare orchids had a chance at a national grant. Her voice trailed off, heavy with the weight of lost dreams. The previous Tristan had forced her to drop out of university midway through her senior year because he didn't like her spending 12 hours a day in the university labs, and because he was insanely jealous of her academic mentor, Dr. Nolan Vance. Nolan Vance. The man I had used as my fake excuse at the hospital. Do you want to finish it? I asked quietly into her ear. Jacqueline stiffened. She turned her head, looking at me with wide, disbelieving eyes. What? Your degree, I said, stroking her cheek. Your thesis. The orchids. Tristan, I'm 4 months pregnant, she stammered, her voice shaking. And I haven't been on campus in almost a year. The academic board probably canceled my candidate status. I own the academic board, I said matter-of-factly. Or rather, the Lyndon Foundation provides 60% of Hudson University's research funding. If you want to finish your degree, you finish it. From home, or from your private greenhouse right here. Jacqueline's breath hitched. You aren't mad? You used to hate me going to the university. You said I was using it as an excuse to avoid you. I was an idiot who was jealous of your intelligence, I said, kissing her forehead. I thought if you got your degree and became a famous botanist, you'd realize I was just an empty suit with a big bank account and leave me. But now, I want the whole world to see how brilliant my wife is. Jacqueline's eyes welled with tears again. She reached up, her small hands wrapping around my neck, pulling me down into a soft, desperate embrace. Thank you. She whimpered against my shoulder. Thank you, Tristan. System notification. Jacqueline's suicide probability has dropped to 20%. Her sense of personal value is recovering. Good, I thought. Now it's time to destroy the last ghost from her past. That afternoon, I drove down to Hudson University alone. I didn't take the Aston Martin. I took a heavy, armored Rolls-Royce Phantom, accompanied by 2 black SUVs filled with security personnel. The campus was quiet in the afternoon sun. I marched straight up the stone stairs of the science building, down the mahogany-paneled hallway, and pushed open the door to the department head's office. Dr. Nolan Vance sat behind his wooden desk, reviewing research papers. He was a man in his late 30s, wearing wire-rimmed glasses and a tweed jacket, the picture of an intellectual academic. When he looked up and saw me, his expression immediately hardened into one of intense disgust. "Tristan Lyndon," Nolan said, standing up slowly. "What are you doing here? If you're here to cause another scene about Jacqueline's academic leave." "Sit down, Professor," I said coldly, closing the door behind me. Nolan's brows furrowed. "Excuse me." I walked up to his desk, pulled a thick leather folder from my coat, and dropped it onto his papers. "That is a $3 million research grant for the botany department," I said, my voice smooth and devoid of heat. "Under one condition." Nolan stared at the folder, then looked up at me with profound suspicion. "What condition? Jacqueline was one of the most talented students I've ever taught. You ruined her career. You dragged her out of my lab. And I am putting her back in," I replied, leaning over his desk, my deep-set eyes fixing him with an absolute, unyielding intensity. "Jacqueline is my wife. Now. She is finishing her thesis from our estate. You will act as her primary advisor, evaluate her research remotely, and ensure her paper is submitted for the national grant before her due date." Nolan's mouth opened. He looked completely bewildered. You married her? But last year, you told me if I ever contacted her again, you'd have my license revoked." I let out a bitter, self-deprecating laugh. "Last year I was a toxic, insecure lunatic who mistook her respect for you as something romantic." Nolan froze. He adjusted his glasses, looking at me as if I had grown a second head. "I am giving her back everything I stole from her," I said, my tone turning deadly serious. "Her dignity, her education, her dreams. And if you are half the dedicated professor you claim to be, you will help her win that national grant. Do we have an understanding?" Nolan stared at me for a long, silent moment. The hostility in his eyes slowly faded, replaced by a deep, stunned respect. "Mr. Lyndon," Nolan breathed, shaking his head in sheer disbelief. "I don't know what happened to you, but if Jacqueline is truly ready to finish her work, my lab is at her disposal." "Good," I said, turning toward the door. "Her private greenhouse will be fully equipped by Monday. Send her the reading list by tonight." 3 months passed. The West Hills estate had transformed into a haven of peace and productivity. Jacqueline's belly was now noticeably round. A beautiful 5-month pregnancy. Her skin was glowing, her weight had stabilized, and her eyes no longer carried that dark, haunting void of despair. Every day, she spent 4 hours in her state-of-the-art greenhouse cultivating rare alpine orchids under the guidance of remote lectures from Dr. Vance. The rest of her time was spent reading, walking through the gardens with me, or designing the nursery alongside Marcus, who had turned into the most ridiculously over-obsessive grandfather in history. The old billionaire visited 3 times a week, bringing crib catalogs, toy collections, and organic fruits imported from 3 different continents. Jacqueline was happy. For the first time in her life, she felt safe. Until the night of the Lyndon Foundation annual gala. It was her first public appearance since our marriage announcement. The event was held in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, attended by the state's highest politicians, business titans, and media moguls. Jacqueline wore a custom emerald green silk maternity gown that draped elegantly over her bump. Her hair was styled in soft waves, anchored by a vintage diamond tiara that had belonged to my late mother. She looked breathtaking, a quiet, regal beauty that instantly commanded the respect of every guest in the room. I stayed by her side every second, holding her hand, guiding her through conversations, blocking pushy reporters, and ensuring she had warm water every 20 minutes. "You look tired," I whispered, leaning down to kiss her temple as we stood near the VIP balcony. "Do you want to go upstairs to the private suite?" "I'm okay," Jacqueline smiled up at me, her eyes bright with genuine affection. She reached up and adjusted my bow tie. I kind of like seeing you brag about me to your father's board members." I chuckled, pulling her closer. "I'm not bragging. I'm just stating facts." System notification. Jacqueline's suicide probability has dropped to 5%. Current mission progress. 85%. You are close to full reformation, host. I felt a wave of profound relief wash through my chest. 5%. We are almost there. "Excuse me." A sharp, dripping sweet voice cut through the air behind us. I turned around. Standing near the entrance of the balcony was a woman in a skin-tight red dress. She was strikingly beautiful, with sharp features and heavily styled dark hair. My internal search engine immediately flagged her identity. Victoria Song. A third-tier actress and the woman who, in the original dark timeline, had been spotted entering a hotel with Tristan on the night Jacqueline committed suicide. Victoria stepped onto the balcony, holding a glass of red wine, her eyes fixed on Jacqueline with a mixture of intense envy and malice. "Mr. Lyndon," Victoria purred, stepping dangerously close to me. It's been so long. I was wondering when you'd invite your old friends back into your life. Jacqueline's smile vanished instantly. Her body went stiff against my side. The color drained from her cheeks as her eyes darted between Victoria and me. The old trauma, the headlines, the rumors, the endless parade of women surged back into Jacqueline's mind like a tidal wave. Victoria, I said, my voice dropping into a register so cold it could freeze. Fire. You were not invited to this balcony. Leave. Victoria let out a light, mocking laugh. She took another step toward Jacqueline, looking down at her pregnant bump with absolute contempt. Oh, don't be so dramatic, Tristan, Victoria sneered softly. I just wanted to congratulate the new Mrs. Lyndon. You really played your cards well, didn't you, sweetie? Using a baby to trap the biggest heir in the city. Jacqueline's breath hitched. Her hands began to tremble. I didn't. Victoria leaned in, dropping her voice to a whisper meant only for the three of us. Did he tell you about 6 months ago, Jacqueline? The night before you found out you were pregnant? He was at my apartment in the hills. He told me you were the most boring, needy woman he had ever met. The balcony fell into a suffocating, dead silence. The wind blew cold off the terrace, rustling the green silk of Jacqueline's dress. I felt Jacqueline's hand slip out of mine. Her face was translucent, her lips trembling violently as she stared at me. The nightmare, the dark, suffocating room, the cold nights, the venomous words from 6 months ago came flooding back into her eyes. Tristan, she whispered, her voice cracking into a terrifyingly frail sound. 6 months ago, the night before. She remembered that night. It was the night Tristan had come home at 4 a.m., smelling of expensive perfume, completely ignoring her tears as she waited up for him. Victoria smirked, lifting her wine glass. She thought she had struck the fatal blow. She thought she had exposed the truth and shattered this fragile marriage. My blood boiled. A wave of pure, unadulterated fury surged through my veins, not for myself, but for the woman standing beside me, whose hard-won peace was being threatened by a parasitic clout chaser. I didn't argue. I didn't make excuses. Instead, I stepped forward, snatched the glass of red wine directly out of Victoria's hand, and poured the entire contents over her head. Splash. The expensive red wine drenched Victoria's styled hair, ran down her face, and ruined her red designer dress. Victoria let out a high-pitched, ear-splitting shriek. Ah, are you crazy? The commotion instantly drew the attention of the entire ballroom. Dozens of high society guests, security guards, and Marcus Lyndon himself rushed toward the balcony. Tristan, Marcus barked, pushing through the crowd. What is going on here? I ignored my father. I didn't even look at Victoria, who was crying and screaming in horror. I turned around, walked up to Jacqueline, and fell onto my knees in front of her, right there in full view of 200 cameras, high society titans, and the city's elite. The crowd gasped in utter shock. The arrogant, ruthless heir to the Lyndon Empire was kneeling on the cold marble balcony floor, looking up at a timid, pregnant girl with eyes filled with absolute, desperate devotion. Jacqueline, I said, my voice echoing across the quieted crowd, raw and unpolished. 6 months ago, I was an absolute piece of trash. I was an arrogant, miserable coward who didn't deserve to breathe the same air as you. Jacqueline stared down at me, tears streaming silently down her pale cheeks. I went to that apartment 6 months ago, I continued, staring straight into her eyes, weaving the final thread of my ultimate lie to protect her heart. Because Victoria promised she had information about a rival company. But when I got there and saw what kind of cheap, manipulative game she was playing, I left. Within 5 minutes. I came back to you. I sat outside your bedroom door until dawn because I was too ashamed to face your pure, beautiful eyes. Victoria's eyes widened in horror. That's a lie. You, security. Marcus Lyndon roared, his face contorted in absolute fury. Throw this woman out. Blacklist her from every event in this city. For heavy security guards dragged the screaming, wine-drenched Victoria away from the balcony. I reached up, taking Jacqueline's trembling hands, pressing them against my cheek. I ruined 2 years of your life, Jacqueline, I whispered, my voice cracking with genuine emotion. I made you feel small. I made you feel insecure. But I swear on my life, on our baby's life, that I will spend the next 50 years making it up to you. If you still want to leave, if you still can't forgive me, I will give you everything I own and walk away. Just don't hurt yourself. Again, please. Jacqueline stood on the balcony under the bright lights of the Plaza Hotel. She looked at her father-in-law, who was looking at her with deep, protective worry. She looked at the high society crowd, who were staring at her with profound respect and envy. And finally, she looked down at the man kneeling at her feet, the man who had bought her a home, restored her education, cut off his past, and offered her his entire world without hesitation. She realized then. It didn't matter what happened 6 months ago. It didn't matter what lies were told in the dark. The man standing before her now was her real home. Jacqueline slowly bent down, her tears falling onto my shoulders as she wrapped her arms around my neck, pulling me up into a fierce, desperate embrace. I don't want to leave. She sobbed into my collarbone, her small frame shaking against mine. I love you, Tristan. I love my home. System notification. Jacqueline's suicide probability has dropped to 0%. Temporal glitch successfully patched. Host has permanently secured the female protagonist's life. For months later, spring had fully bloomed in the West Hills estate. The greenhouse was filled with the delicate, breathtaking lavender petals of the Lyndon alpine orchid, the rare hybrid species Jacqueline had successfully cultivated and published in the National Journal of Botanical Sciences. Her thesis had won first place at the National University competition 2 weeks ago. Today, the master bedroom of the private estate was quiet, filled with the soft, warm light of a late afternoon sun. Jacqueline lay on the king-sized bed, wearing a soft white silk robe. She looked slightly tired, but her face was radiant, filled with a deep, unshakable peace. Beside her, sitting on the edge of the bed, was Marcus Lyndon. The feared chairman of the Lyndon conglomerate was holding a tiny, blanket-wrapped bundle in his arms, tears streaming down his wrinkled cheeks as he rocked his new granddaughter. Look at her, Marcus whimpered, his voice dropping into that absurdly soft tone he reserved only for his family. She has your eyes, Jacqueline. Thank God. She doesn't look like that ugly brat Tristan. Jacqueline let out a soft, beautiful laugh, leaning her head against her pillows. She has his nose, Dad. I stepped into the room, carrying a tray of warm soup and fresh tea. I set the tray down on the nightstand, walked over to the bed, and sat down on the other side of Jacqueline, wrapping my arm around her shoulders. Marcus looked up at me, wiped his tears awkwardly on his sleeve, and carefully passed the tiny baby into my arms. Don't drop her, you idiot, the old man grumbled affectionately. I'm going downstairs to tell the board that the company is taking a 3-day holiday to celebrate. Marcus walked out of the room, closing the door softly behind him. The room fell into a peaceful, golden silence. I looked down at the tiny, sleeping face in my arms. She had dark hair, pale skin, and a tiny, perfect button nose. What should we name her? I whispered, leaning down to kiss Jacqueline's forehead. Jacqueline reached out, her soft fingers stroking the baby's cheek, then moving up to rest in my palm. She looked up at me, her eyes clear, bright, and filled with an absolute, unshakable love. Hope, Jacqueline murmured softly, a radiant smile touching her lips. Hope. Lyndon. A crisp, familiar electronic voice chimed in my mind one last time. Mission fully accomplished. The scumbag reformation program has ended. Host is granted permanent, lifetime residence in this world. Enjoy your life, Tristan. I closed my mind to the system, letting the digital voice fade into nothingness. I looked at my wife, my daughter, and the warm, sunlit room that surrounded us. I reached out, pulling Jacqueline and our baby close against my chest, feeling the steady, beautiful beat of their hearts against mine. Welcome home, I whispered,